Welcome to the Para Presents the Gig Economy, a weekly discussion hosted by me, Rodeo Steve, and David Pickerel, the CEO and founder of Para. David, welcome. Our guest tonight is the newly elected Colorado House member, Stephanie Vigil. If you guys remember, Stephanie was a guest of the podcast, I don't even know, maybe 5-6 months ago.
Something like that.
It's a while. It was a while.
I mean,
now. Yeah. It's been a minute now. So, but she was on the podcast before the election. So before we even get into the meat of tonight, I'm going to let Stephanie walk us through the actual what happened since then, like since that time, and because I remember your leg was broke or your foot was broke. There was other things going on too. You had some obstacles on top of doing all this. So I'll let you tell the story. So go ahead.
Thanks. I did have a pretty eventful year. I kind of keep forgetting about the foot. It's been so I broke my foot in like the first week of September, which on my electoral calendar was about 6 weeks before ballots dropped, which is exactly when you want to be out pounding the pavement as much as you can to do voter outreach. So it kind of put that on hold, and I had to get a little bit more creative with things. I'm Steph Vigil. It is Vigil, by the way. I just figured I'll tell you up front so that you can know, because everybody says it wrong at least once. It's okay.
I said it wrong the last time. You corrected me too.
So. Okay. It means vigilant. So you're on the right track. It makes sense, right?
That's what I meant. I meant that.
Exactly. I was running in a, previously Republican held seat in Colorado Springs. We're the second largest city in the state of Colorado, and it is a blue state officially. But it is, fundamentally like a right-leaning county and city, Colorado Springs is. And so it was definitely a big challenge to flip a new seat there. I had run for the old HD16 in 2020 before there was, census and redistricting and redrawing and all of that. Put a good dent in the numbers and kind of hoped that maybe, getting a little bit more name ID and getting some momentum and, putting myself out there a bit would help set me up for success if I wanted to try it again. And of course I wanted to try it again and worked really hard. We knocked a good, I think we knocked a good 16,000 doors or so across the whole team. So, you just got to hustle, I think is the big thing. If you want to win a seat that everybody says can't be won, there is such a thing as something that's just too deep one way or the other. But this was not, and this was within that persuadable range that if you get out, talk to enough people and, put in the legwork, you can do that. So I am the first Democrat elected to that seat. I am among the younger members of our legislature. We don't have a ton of people under 40, but it's a bigger pool than I think it's ever been. I'm also the first gig app driver elected to the Colorado legislature. So I came in here with a lot of varying ideas about what we can do to make this workforce work better for the people who do it. Never with the intent to force people to be employed or anything like that, right? Obviously, there's been a lot of great debate about that sometimes goes very poorly. But to really work with the things that drivers have been saying, we want to see change. That we want the app companies to do what they say they do. We want there to be strong transparency measures. We want to have the right to a review and some kind of process and to have a say in the procedures if we're deactivated or something, for instance. So it is one of my big projects this year is a gig work transparency bill that has started over in the Senate. It is Senate Bill 23098. If you are taking notes. But we kind of just came into the seat with, a lot of pro-worker and pro-renter and pro-environment items on my agenda. So I am also running a renters' rights bill and doing some clean air work and things like that. And then right after I was elected, if you haven't placed, for those of you who are outside of the state here, if you haven't placed where I serve, Club Q is in my district. And that is also part of my community. I'm a queer person. I'm married to a queer person. My whole family and community is, we're alphabet mafia folks. And that mass shooting at the club that's in my district, that's kind of right around the corner from where I live, really shook our community. And I found myself really thrown into the public eye, and like finding myself like, well, I guess I kind of should out myself. I haven't really, I haven't like shy about it, but I certainly didn't go around being like, knock, 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 I'm queer, will you vote for me? It wasn't like that. So
just to get the timeline straight, the shooting of that in the election.
Yeah, so because the shooting was in like mid to late, I'm mixing up the dates now, mid to late November. So like I had just been elected, I think not even 2 weeks beforehand.
Right. So the voting was passed when that happened, which if you guys aren't familiar, it was a nightmare, and you guys can look it up. It's on every media, you can find it. So yeah.
So, it's just and it's not even the first, mass shooting we've had in Colorado Springs in recent memory. There was a birthday party shooting, 6 people dead just like a year and a half beforehand. It's been a pretty big problem here. And then, to have it happen at one of the few like really dedicated, safe places for the LGBTQ community in Colorado Springs was really tragic. And it definitely brought a lot of people out to stand up to the bigotry and the hatred and the exclusion that's gone on, and to be like, okay, listen, like maybe I'm not the most liberal person in the world, and I'm not, woke or whatever people want to say about the left and about liberals. But I think even in a city like Colorado Springs that's pretty right leaning, most people were absolutely disgusted that somebody thought that was acceptable to do, or that they,
I would hope that regardless of your political viewpoints, that bothered you on a not you, but everybody.
Yeah.
Both sides of the aisle on a very personal level. I mean, let's be honest too. Colorado this is not new to us. Columbine, we had Lone Tree, we had the supermarket in Boulder. I mean,
Aurora.
I mean, we've and in a supermarket there was an Instacart shopper killed. I mean, this is. I know all states face this. The Walmart. I mean, we've had more shootings than we care to talk about here, and they never make sense. They just don't, because I mean, I think Stephanie can agree. We're very good, kind people out here. I really, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been one after the other though, and I just feel like Columbine feels like a while ago, but really it wasn't that long ago in the big picture.
What's crazy, I guess, is I know all these incidents, but I never placed that a lot of them were in Colorado, actually.
Everyone we just named was in Colorado.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's to say nothing of the suicide rate in this state. And, and I think this is true in a lot of parts of the country as well. But in Colorado, I can say for sure, the majority of gun deaths are suicides, and the majority of completed suicides are completed with the handgun. So we have a lot to work on there. I have some longer term legislative plans about that. Not anything that I'm ready to run this session, but we really do need to tackle some of that combination of poor mental health, but also like toxic behavioral and belief systems and whatnot, like what happened at Club Q, and to have that combined with ready access to lethal means. Yeah. I mean, it's a toxic combination. We've got to come up with some ways to curb it. I am a co-sponsor on a bill to expand the number of people who can file a red flag petition. That's the extreme risk protection order provision that we have in Colorado law that enables a select number of individuals, like certain people in certain relationships with someone who is deemed to be a threat to themselves or others. They can file a petition to have that person like temporarily separated from their guns until we can get things to die back down. And it can be really effective, but currently not enough people are able to utilize that mechanism. So there is going to be some action coming on that, and that'll be kind of like the big thing that I'm able to do from here about that.
And that's a whole nother issue. That's a whole nother segment, you guys, because why we're here tonight is, and again, prayers to everybody at Club Q and every other one of the ones I mentioned prior, because all of those, my mom lives in Tantra Lake, David, you probably have no clue where that is. Stephanie might. It's about 1.5 miles from that King Supers. That was her store in South Boulder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when that happened, like all the phones blacked out. I couldn't get a hold of her for about an hour. I knew pretty much she wasn't there, but at the same time, I couldn't get her. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going? We were getting no info. So again, this is a whole different thing. Tonight, I think that, I'm glad we mentioned that, but I want to talk about this Senate Bill 23098. I think that also, a lot of the things in it kind of go after the same thing as the drivers' rights movement. Surprisingly enough, because it's not asking for what some of the states go after. It's just, it's in my opinion, and I read through the whole PDF, but it's more about transparency. I read some of the things like, making sure that the drivers see the breakdown of what Uber's being paid, what the driver's being paid before you can tip. I don't know if, when we get to it, I do have a couple questions, but I want you to kind of walk us through that, because I know you're familiar with the drivers' rights movement. We talked about it the last time. It seems very similar to that.
Yeah, that's not coincidental. So that's great. So I'm also a member of a non-traditional labor union here in Colorado, the Colorado Independent Drivers United. We are organized under CWA, the Communication Workers of America, but we don't really operate like a traditional trade union because, again, like we're independent drivers. Working off of our own devices and vehicles and not in a shared workspace. It's not going to be like your average shop floor with an organized workforce. So what we've mostly been pushing on as a group is getting the companies to do like the drivers' rights movement is pushing for, like, hey, like, you make this whole set of promises and offers to the public as consumers, and also to working people who want to work on these platforms, that you're going to be your own boss. You get to call the shots, do your own thing. We're going to offer you jobs, in a contractor fashion. Say yes, say no. You're in charge of your own work. And then what actually ends up happening when push comes to shove is that they have all these really elaborate ways of manipulating the user interface, what they tell you, what they don't tell you, the algorithm they run on, to kind of get people to do more work for less money, and not see that they're being played until you've tried this for 6 months and concluded that it's a ripoff and you move on. So they're burning through drivers. Some of us, and granted, like Steve and David and myself and in my work, because I'm like a multi-apper on the delivery side, you find a way to make it work for you and it's better. But there's kind of this sense of like, yeah, it's better for me because they're figuring out how to scam other people into taking these worthless offers. And that's sad. I don't like that. I don't like for that to happen to consumers who think that this must be a pretty good deal for the people who are, bringing them their sushi or whatever. So we've really pushed on that. And then the other side for us in CDU and the Independent Drivers United is to go after the regulatory agencies in our state and try to figure out why they're not enforcing the rules that they set. So we had the TNC Act in 2014 allowed Uber and Lyft to come into the state. That was before I was even here, back here anyway.
That's when I started.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. So it put TNCs, Transportation Network Companies, under the purview of the Public Utilities Commission, which is a little strange, but I think it made sense at the time because the PUC had been dealing with taxi companies. And so, the idea was they're going to collect a fee from these companies annually, and they're going to use it to, set some rules and hopefully enforce those rules. But they haven't been, right? And of course, how would they? They don't really do consumer protection. They definitely don't do worker rights or like labor disputes. That's not in their wheelhouse. So it's been kind of a strange venue for them all along. Mm-hmm. And so we've tried a couple of different times to like figure out ways to like put some pressure on that agency. Hey, like, you kind of do have this line in your own rules that says that the companies are supposed to be transparent. They're supposed to give full information. It doesn't give a lot of detail, but it's in there. Can you at least enforce that? And it's just not in their wheelhouse. That's not what they do. So our bill is going to make those transparency requirements explicit. right? You must show a breakdown of, what the take rate or take amount is, what the driver is being paid. The driver has a full right to complete information about the destination, how much they'll be paid, what the mileage is going to be.
You're
and so
right now
on.
you're talking about from the customer side.
From the customer side and for our
right,
and
but I
for
mean the
our sake.
customer side also will see.
Yes.
Here's how it goes.
Yes.
Here's where it's going.
Yes. And I think that's reasonable, right? Because sometimes I've, and I've talked to people who are outside of our little gig app bubble or, gig life bubble. They'll be like, yeah, but I spent like, $50 on an Uber ride the other night. They must be getting paid really well. I'm like, well, I mean, you would hope so. But I took a $19 ride the other day just to get to the Capitol on a snowy day. It's about a mile. It's not that long of a trip, but I didn't want to walk it on the ice. So I just called for a ride. It was a $19 ride for 1 mile. And I asked my driver, how much did they offer you? You guys want to take a guess how much they offered him?
What?
It was better than $5.
David's gonna go. I'm gonna let David take this.
I was saying $5, but what do you think, Steve?
I was gonna say a little more with the up. I don't know. Was it the upfront model? Because I mean, here in Denver, we're using the upfront pricing where you see everything, the miles. They're now doing the full. Here's the amount you're gonna make. Here's where you're going.
Sure.
I would say 7.
Yeah, they offered him 8, but
okay.
Yeah. And I still think like that's pretty bonkers, right? Because it's less than half of the amount you paid. And, of course, like we still have to pay for our own vehicle and our device and the service on our device and our insurance and our gas money and our upkeep. So how is the company making off with that much of what you are paying as a consumer? They don't even have the overhead. The driver has the overhead. So, I think breaking that down for people when right now it looks so much like, oh, if I pay a lot for a ride, the driver must be getting paid. What are they whining about? This is really like we just kind of have to open up this, black box that they're hiding in and shine some light on the issue.
Yeah, I feel like, I do feel like, some people, there was the time when drivers were paid so well, like you were talking about in 2014, 15, 16, like that was just great. That was to flood the market with drivers. That's how they do it. That was the oversaturation 3 years. I do feel like some people understand the drivers aren't paid enough, but I get some pretty advanced people who understand it even beyond and go, yeah, but if they're, and David and I used to ask for just this, and I think it was just last week, we were saying that maybe something a little more is needed. I don't exactly know what it is, but we always used to say, hey, if you show it all up front, it's kind of on the driver. If the driver doesn't want to take it, he doesn't have to. And if that's not going to make him money, I mean, a company is allowed to charge what they want if they're not cheating the driver. If they're being honest with the driver and saying, hey, it pays $1, they can charge 50 and go out of business, kind of thing. I mean, that's their prerogative, but it took them since 2008, it took them 15 years to decide, hey, let's be transparent, which came from other states and other things going on, Prop 22, Washington State, these other states and other states looking to go this route, I believe, to actually go, okay, well, it's time. And I actually talked to David about, do they have an algorithmic gain now? Like, have they got 15 years of data on us to the point where they're like, okay, now we get it. And actually where maybe even the upfront is a worse pay model, but now they're like, this is what you asked for.
Yeah, well, and I think that's, that's what we can do from here, right? Is to take them at their word that the model that they've set up for this entire industry, that it is what it appears to be, and that it actually, right, because this is like the whole point of like the gig app world, is that you're supposed to be able to work for yourself and make your own decisions and whatnot. And like you said, as long as they're telling you the truth, I mean, if you choose to take a crap order, that's kind of on you. One of the things I will say the bill gets into that I think is pretty novel. Honestly, I think the whole thing is pretty novel. I haven't seen anybody else, any other states bring it up yet. And we're certainly not delving into the classification issue. I think, there are still.
And that's one thing I really like. I like that you're not doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are a limited number of people who kind of do want to be hired, but this really isn't this isn't that conversation. No. And I think there might be a space for that where Maybe in order for these companies to stay viable, especially if they get rules like we're about to impose in Colorado, they might find themselves wanting to have a certain workforce that is hired and supplement the rest with, I don't know how they want to do it, but we're not getting into that debate right now because it's almost beside the point. The world that we're living in right now is one where you get offers on your smartphone screen, like just rapid fire, and you have a limited amount of time to make a decision, and you deserve enough information to make that decision. So the other thing that we're taking aim at in the bill, and I'm curious what your thoughts will be about this, is to go after the nonlinear compensation models, like the challenges and the missions and the complete
games.
The games.
Let's just be honest.
The games. Complete 7 orders in a row without turning down a single one, and you'll get this little bonus. Well, if you get one little thing wrong, right, or you don't finish in time, or it doesn't, whatever, the order doesn't close, and like you don't close your your offer out in time, whatever it is, you don't get it. Or it turns out, hey, you agreed to this challenge where you have to take all 7 or 8 offers or whatever in a row, so you're going to get all the crap offers because you can't say no to them now, right? Like it's if
you got the first 6 or 7, whatever leaves that last one, we're like, hey, that was pretty good. You'll either get the worst last one, or you'll be waiting a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I've had that happen before.
They do like to have you idle on the app, and they know most people won't sign off with that last one left.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how much you can manipulate a whole lot of people if you're the one with all the data and no one's allowed to see what your process is.
Yeah.
Right.
The part I like a lot really is sort of the, I feel like part of the equation that's missing, consumers don't know 63% of a dasher's income comes from tips, right? Because they don't know that, people cannot tip or pay accordingly, right? And I think a lot of people have this idea of like, hey, I paid $12 on top of the price of my food, all of that's going to the dasher. And I really think that's a big part of the equation really is just clearly lay it out and let people know. And I feel like that's a part that is missing, frankly, from even something we have, even the TT stuff we've been able to do. That's an important part, I think, that I like to see is this idea of if you are the marketplace or you claim you are sort of this middle software provider, just make it clear who's getting what along the value chain, right? And I think this idea of sort of like light through end to end is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's a really important thing to note too, because I think especially in, amongst like the average working person, especially like I come from like poor people. I've been a poor people my whole life too. The idea that you're not really supposed to talk about money, it tends to be like deeply ingrained, right? Like we're not supposed to talk about it, right? We don't, but like that, if you don't have like a breakdown of that, then we can't really be honest with each other about who it's fair for and who it isn't. So like you said, that, all the way down the chain is good for people to have.
I would say a lot in one thing that's been happening in the YouTube community, whether some of the people seem negative and some seem positive, there seem to be some challenges going on lately where you're really displaying your market, because we always talk about market to market differences. And it shows how much these people are working in a week because they're challenging each other, and it shows how much they're earning along the way. So it's kind of fun in real time to see these differences because it kind of shows you. And again, yes, you do have to take into account the cost of living. I mean, do you live in rural? Do you pay 1/10 of the rent I pay in Denver? Because
Right.
if you do and you make what I make, you're making a killing over me.
Right.
I mean, like, I'm gonna be honest, Denver, a lot of people still say, yeah, okay, maybe it's more expensive, but it's not like LA or New. Denver's pretty expensive, you guys. I'm not gonna lie. Colorado's expensive. Denver's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
It's up there with some of those top expensive cities.
Yeah, and Colorado Springs has just skyrocketed in the, rents especially, in the last handful of years, where it's like it used to be that like the deal you could get on like a 1-bedroom apartment here was like far and away better than what you could get like in, in Denver or even like in Fort Collins or something. And now like I was just checking the latest batch of like market rates for a 1-bed or a studio. We're priced about the same as Denver.
Yeah, I mean, one thing before David interjects with anything, one thing I did want to mention is it's funny to me. I was thinking about this before we came on tonight. This was one of the thoughts I was trying to get my head around. Before the pandemic, Grubhub showed you all the transparency. Grubhub had a wait list to get on Grubhub. They were keeping the right amount, or trying to keep the right amount of drivers, probably a little more than were needed, but that's kind of needed to do this correctly. Not too much oversaturation, but they were nobody was really winning the delivery space, but Grubhub was doing it right. Uber Eats allows you to tip after the fact, and who knows what they're doing behind the scenes. DoorDash has a wall built saying, hey, here's your base pay, and we lower that every day. and here's part of the tip, but there could be more. I mean, like, every one of them except for Grubhub had a problem, and Grubhub's doing the worst.
Yeah.
And yet before the pandemic, I don't think any of them were doing great, but I would say Grubhub was probably doing the best.
So DoorDash was actually pretty good in my market, and I was actually solely a Dasher when I was actually, you know, out working deliveries, because I've done some other stuff as well. Pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And then actually, you know, the pandemic year was kind of odd for me because I was mostly out of driving for a while. I was doing some other, you know, I was on a campaign, and then I ended up running that year, so I definitely was like doing other work. And so I didn't come back on until after that election, like the following beginning of 2021. So that was actually like my foray back into to delivering in the pandemic era. And it was kind of wild how much it changed. I was like, I guess I'm a multi-apper now. I have to turn on multiple. I can't just do the one, because DoorDash used to be so much better.
So yeah, David, before I jump ahead here, do you have anything to add here, or?
I'd just like to ask Stephanie a question, sort of like, you're out there, broken foot, hitting the campaign trail. I guess how many, one, it was impressive, 16,000 doors, but like, how many people did you talk to a number of people who did participate in the gig economy? I think the second part is, for the people who didn't, you know, was this an issue that people even cared about? Like, what was your read on that?
Yeah. So it wasn't like one of like my primary topics that I like put on everything, because I think it was kind of confusing to people, like why that would matter, why it was something I could do anything about, what was the relevance there. But I did frequently, if I had the opportunity, when people are like, well, what do you do in like your regular job? I'm like, well, you know, like, don't laugh. I'm like a gig worker. I'm like one of those millennials, right? I do a variety of odd jobs. But mostly I like to drive on the apps is what I do most of the time. And it's amazing how many people are just kind of like, ooh, what is that like? Because like, I'm constantly confused how anybody is surviving doing that. Like, can you actually make a living, or is it like really just a side hustle thing? I tried Instacart and I thought I was going to like, just like, you know, drive the car off a bridge because I hated it so much. Right. Like, because are we Instacart haters here?
I don't think other people understand how bad Colorado has Instacart.
It's terrible. It was terrible. I tried.
There's people in Austin who crush it, and they show me what they're doing. There's some cities, but I keep telling people it's here. It's the worst. I mean, it's
no. I when I was trying to get started with it, I was like, I'm going to give it a try. I know like a couple people who've made a go of it. I kept finding myself getting stuck at the like at the Costco. You do not want to be somebody's Costco Instacart shopper. It's miserable. I really appreciate that you're both like, oh yeah, no, screw Instacart. Like, it makes me feel better. But, you know, I didn't really like super delve into it with a lot of those folks at the doors about this particular bill, because I wasn't like, you don't want to like say you're going to do something and unless you know you're actually going to be able to do it. Right. So a couple of my bills that I'm on, I'm like, yeah, I knew I could go do this. I knew I could work on this. And this bill, I was like, we were still like in the process and with CDU, just with my drivers union, of just like communicating with anyone who would listen, who was already in the legislature, about like what our goals and priorities were and what we felt like was the important next step. And so it's been really exciting to see it come together in this bill, because I actually was on the other side of it, and now I get to help carry it, and it almost just it was almost too good, you know.
So
I love it, and I love that you're sort of representing just what we know most of the gig workers. We talk to a lot of gig workers, all three of us, and we just know it comes back to, I know I keep repeating always the same three things, right? But I'm in charge of my work, my time is valuable, I have a say in the system. So to me, it's just awesome that you ran, you won, you're there, and now you're introduced a bill in what you thought would be hard to introduce. So just
and don't forget that she didn't add in that it wasn't added in about employee model, because I agree with her. That's a different time. And I actually I think if some of these other problems were solved, it might not have to be an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily needs to be. And this is the thing I've come back to time and time again, is that like we are really, like, we're living through a second machine age right now, right? Just like, early industrial era, there are a whole bunch of new things going on technology wise and in workplaces, and that they just did not have a good comparison for, like, in the agrarian world that we had been living in before. And so you kind of have to legislate differently, and you have to have different economic models to work with, and you have to like work around, you have to navigate the space that you're in, and you can't necessarily use the tools you used to use. And we're kind of going through that all over again, where the future of work is frequently going to be app-based or remote or contract-based or whatever it's going to be. Like, it's out of the bottle. It's out of the bottle. Yep. Flex is big. Yeah. That's out of the bottle. It's not going back in. So how do we make it work for people so that it's not just another way for like people with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of power and a whole lot of secrecy to what they do, just using it to extract from the rest of us and leave us high and dry. That's what we need to be looking at. And so that's, I come back to those core tenets too, David, over and over again, where I'm like, hey, like, there's also like this nationwide driver's rights movement. I can't do anything about the other states, but we're going to do it in ours. And
so Colorado Senate Bill 23098 is the sponsors are Senator Robert Rodriguez, Denver, Representative Colorado Springs, and then Representative Jennifer Bacon of Denver. You're the only freshman, right?
Yeah. Yep. I'm the one okay. Freshman on there.
So, this is something I think that this needs to be discussed, because in all the articles I read, it mentions it. And I think this might throw people off a bit to the W-2 part, because, so it's about transparency. Companies would have to disclose the take rates to the drivers and customers before it happens. Sometimes that is not disclosed to a driver before we accept a ride, said Brian Winkler, a driver for Uber Eats and organizer for as you mentioned, Colorado Independent Drivers United, communication worker at American Local 7777. Now, I think that right there worries some people.
Oh, that because we're organized under like the broader union.
Because local 7777 tells beep,
sure.
Union.
That's a
union.
That's
what people think.
Well, and that's why I always try to like clarify for people, like, we're a so CDU is just independent drivers, right? So we're all Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, whatever else it is. We don't have any hop, skip, drive people. That would be interesting. They're a whole other world here. But that's why I always make a point of like mentioning to people, we are a non-traditional union, right? Like we can't have a collective bargaining unit for what we do. It's not that kind of arrangement. But if you want to get in on just the process of like getting organized, kind of getting our collective heads around some shared goals and some shared values and things that we want to work on within the world that we work in, you kind of have to have some structure. And one of the things that some of those like more conglomerate, bigger unions have is that structure. They're like, here's how you do. They get yourself like a leadership structure. Here's how you recruit for it. Here are some resources that we have for you. Like there's just more that you can tap into to advocate for yourself and the people you're organizing with if you partner up with somebody like that. So
I think where I keep coming back to, right, is the fact that, the apps have done a good job of drawing a line in the sand that basically said, are you here or are you there? Right. And I think where I always go back to is for all of us, when we talk to, there is this 70% of drivers like right here who generally want 95% of the same thing. right? So I think what I really like is basically saying, regardless of where you fall on sort of the spectrum, can we make life actually better in a way that we all agree tomorrow, basically, right? And I think reading from this bill, I do think that that's definitely the case, right? And I think that's why we're proud to support it. I do have one question, and I think sort of almost like, does it go far enough? And actually, this is something that Steve and I have talked about, which is, Steve, perhaps you might be better to speak about this, but this idea of like the apps have to provide an estimate or their best estimate.
Yeah, I
as to
actually
what the
I
pay
actually
might
pulled
be.
that portion out because I wanted to ask Stephanie about it. So on page 4, or I'm sorry, page 7 of the PDF, number 4, sub number 3, an estimate of the total fare that the consumer will be charged for the transportation task, and an estimate of the total amount the TNC will pay the driver before any tip is added for the transportation task. To me, that sounds like a little bit of maybe an exit loophole for the TNC companies.
It could potentially be. So, without delving too much into like, one-on-one stakeholder conversations and whatnot, there have been like a lot of conversations about this already. And rest assured, like the app companies' lobbyists are up in my grill and have been since before the session started.
I'm sure.
So,
and that's not going to stop. It's gonna
no, of course not. No, of course not. No,
Yeah.
but it's, in a way, it's good because a lot of them, are they do aim to be pretty friendly and warm towards legislators who they want to get along with, which is good. But they had a lot of things to say about like, well, there's only so much that we can actually fit on the screen, and how are we going to make that work? And can't we just send people after the fact? Can it be on the receipt? And so that's kind of whittled down to like, okay, like you have to provide an estimate, but then the post-transaction communication is the one that's going to be hyper accurate and detailed, and we'll have more that you can. So if you start to compare and contrast those as, an average customer, an average passenger, and you see gross disparities, then we know that something is wrong. And
so that's for sort of the consumer. So the consumer on the post fact will see these details on their bill. But in the bill, I guess drivers also get full tip transparency as it reads?
So we certainly do on the delivery side, because there's no excuse for that, right? You're taking the trip that you're taking, and they have generally already put the tip on there as it is, right? So I might have to actually double check some of like the finer points of the language, but yes, it should be on both sides. And if it isn't, then we have to do a language correction, because the whole point is for everybody to get that breakdown. So yeah, there were some things about, like, oh, we don't have like, there's only so much technological capacity for which, it's a little sus to me, but we're trying to work with them about, what can you do that will be compliant with the new law, because we don't want it to be impossible to fulfill. But the other big piece of that too is right now, there is no clear statutory obligation to be transparent. And even though like the PUC has, like I said, they have like that one little, line here and there about like they should be showing you full information, there's no recourse if they don't. Whereas like our bill puts that under the Department of Labor Standards and Statistics, where it belongs.
Yeah,
so that
I think
can actually
and you said recourse, so that makes me want to make sure that we cover a little bit before we run out of time of recourse for deactivated drivers.
Yeah.
Because I know that's part of the bill as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So finally, you have a right to a review. Simply put, you have the right to a review. If you are deactivated, there's a certain time frame in which they can pause you. They can suspend your access for 3 days and for 72 hours without necessarily having to justify it. But then you have to be able to get that review. And we made one carve out in that for if you are being investigated for like an assault claim or a sexual harassment claim or something like that by a passenger that's a little bit more serious, they get a little bit more time to work with, but you have the opportunity to be heard, have the Department of Labor actually review your situation instead of just having, the customer service on the other end with the app company say like, sorry, we just shut it off. What are you going to do about it? Yeah. And that's a big shift from where we've been. And I don't know that I don't think any other states have done that yet. So, but I hope that
I feel like the companies are almost worse about it, right? They basically say, because you're an independent contractor, we can't tell you what the complaint was or can't tell you why you've been deactivated.
Yeah, well, we've got some
Or they
protective
don't
language in
need
there for
to.
victims. Yeah.
They can just say, we don't need to tell you.
Yeah. Well, and
I
the
mean,
problem
it's
too is
sad,
it
but
doesn't even.
that is what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have some protective language in there to ensure that it, if, for instance, if you're a passenger and you're like, hey, like my driver, like literally sexually assaulted me, right? Like you are protected, your privacy is protected and whatnot, but that also there's a path for someone to clear their name and get back on. And I think also the way that this has been done, where it's just like, well, again, you're an IC, we don't have to tell you anything and we really shouldn't. I don't know that that's really a good path forward for a victim getting justice either, because we don't have a resolution process. And that needs to include everyone involved. If someone has been out of line, we need to be able to do something about it. And if all they do is just get deactivated and they just go sign up for another company and hurt somebody else, that's not good for victims either. But at the same time,
you got to make sure, and to anybody who truly is, yes, of course, take them to the cleaners, do what you need to do. But we already know people try and claim a free ride, even if it means the driver will get deactivated. They still want an $8 free ride.
Yeah.
So they're going to call it in and make up a lie. I would hope many don't make up a lie like that. That gets you're really now. I mean, it sucks that even lies are made in the beginning, but something like that could really, it's going to be tough.
And that's why you need the review. That's why you need a review, and you should have the right to that. And there should be some process. I mean, I just think, that's also good for victims, right? That's good for victims. That's good for the whole system. And it ensures that we have a total, ecosystem of rideshare that is safer.
We all know this, right? Like any driver or deliverer who's done this a couple thousand trips, you've been randomly more people than not have been randomly deactivated. I mean, I got randomly deactivated by DoorDash after I hadn't dashed for a couple of months, and I thought, hey, they finally caught on to me, right?
It's probably because he signed up with David at withpara.com.
I mean, it's been sitting as that forever, basically, right? But then I reached out to supports, and they're like, we can't tell you why. And then 3 days later, we reviewed and you're back. And I'm like, nothing makes any sense here whatsoever, basically.
It's almost like they didn't want you to call and follow up. But if you did,
I know.
Okay.
But this idea that, a company that's running some of the most complex matching algorithms and routing algorithms cannot figure out how to put, their take rate on a customer's receipt is just complete and utter BS. And I think it's just hiding behind this idea of technology. But I guess sort of like taking a step back, if I had to summarize the bill in sort of, 3 points, it's tip transparency and pay transparency for drivers, transparency for the end consumers as to who is getting paid what between the restaurant, the deliverer, or the driver, basically. And the third one being a due process or some sort of a process to say, hey, why was I activated, and push back against that and have some sort of a feedback loop in there.
And on the transparency part, David, we need to add on your first point is right, but we also need to add all the details that you need too, not just the page transparency. Where are you going? Who are you picking up? Where are you taking them? You need all the details. Independent contractors. I've been one out of the gig economy since the mid 90s. And I can tell you, some people tell me well, if you can't make your own price, that's not independent contractorship. It is 100%. I get people who offer me jobs in production all the time. They give me hey, it's $500 a day. Here's the per diem. It's a hotel room. Do you want to take the job? That's independent contractorship. They're being upfront. They're showing me. And they're companies I love working with. So, I mean, it's not as black and white as if you don't set your rate, you're not an independent contractor. That's not true.
But if you don't get the information, you're not.
Right.
If you don't get the information,
I get it in a different way. They're giving me everything. Here's what the offer is. Do you want it?
Right.
And there's no penalty to me if I don't take it.
No. And to me, I mean, I look at these sort of 3 points and I'm like, this is something I support. I'm sure that this is a lot that a lot of drivers would support. And I guess with that in mind, Stephanie, how can we push this ahead? Like what happens now? You've introduced the bill.
Sure.
If I'm a driver or deliverer in Colorado, what do I do?
Sure. So the next stop for the bill is for it to get through Senate appropriations, and that's because it's got a little bit of a fiscal impact on it, just to fund the Department of Labor. In Colorado, we are super, super fiscally restrained and fiscally responsible. Everything gets a fiscal note. The fiscal impact is detailed, and it has to go through an additional committee and everything and get approved. So it'll hang out in that committee for a little bit because it's still on the Senate side, and we haven't yet done the long bill, which is just our big budget for the coming fiscal year. So when that is complete, we'll be able to get more bills through appropriations. So if you wanted to go visit the bill's website, you can just search for it at leg.colorado.gov, but it's Senate Bill 2398.
And we will put all of them in the show notes.
You'll put all that in the show notes, yeah.
You'll see them all down in the show notes, links to everything.
So you can email committee members. If you are a Colorado resident, you can look up your own representative and or senator and ask them to support the bill and tell them why. That definitely share your experience as a driver. I think that's been the big thing that has been missing in this conversation for so long. And I think, to Steve, to your point about, I think that kind of making people perk up a little bit, like, ooh, CWA, that's like a big union thing. Like, the overarching umbrella organization is, but CDU is just like a whole mess of independent drivers going like, hey, we want this to actually work for us, but we haven't been talking to each other. And they're going to thrive on that, right? The app companies are going to thrive on that. They don't want us to talk to each other and compare notes and learn from each other. So
is it
doing
okay
that has
for
been
me
a
to
big
really
deal.
quick, we're going to, and I'll include it in the show notes too, but is it okay for me to put up your website real quick here on the screen?
Please do. That was my other thing I was going to mention. Go to stephanievigil.com. Yep. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get regular updates about this because I'm carrying the bill. Especially if you're local, if you're in Colorado, when it comes over to the House, we'll have another committee hearing in our Business Affairs and Labor Committee. And that'll be another opportunity for you to share your story.
I think even beyond Colorado, I know that this has actually gotten quite a bit of press nationally, right? I think, to a lot of people, I've talked to other legislators in other states, I've talked to other people in other states, and they've pointed to, I think, Colorado, y'all have made a bit of a bang. So I also recommend to drivers out there, if you see this and you want to do something, one, pass it on to your legislator, pass it on to your senator, congressman, pass it on to your local government, point to it and say, hey, why don't we have something like this? Number two, this is a bit of a sneak peek, but also the drivers' right movement has been working on something as well. So I think we will start to see a bit.
This, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
Wait, David, did I do that right? If I did,
no, I think it's drivers' rights. But I think no, driver rights. That's right.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I always get confused. I always think drivers, but it's driver rights, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think this is correct. Yes.
Yep. We have something more to come there, but I think in the same vein of what Stephanie's working on, we're trying to pass similar things in other states also. So more to come. This is just the beginning of a bigger movement. But really on my end, just, we have a gig worker legislating for gig workers.
Yeah. I mean, we should all celebrate that too. I mean, Stephanie,
right.
I think when you were running, I asked you if you were going to be the first in the country and you said you didn't know.
I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure.
I'm still not sure, but here's what I can say. I'm digging in this stuff all day. I've never seen a story of another one.
Yeah.
So if there is another one, please come out of the woodworks because we don't know about you, or maybe they didn't even admit that part of the story. I don't know. But as far as I know, you are the only one in the country.
Yeah. Hey, I'll wear that crown as long as it's mine, right? I'll just take it for now. I just think too, I made a big point of, just as a political figure in general, I've been pretty big about just bringing my whole self to my work, including the things that people aren't always proud about, right? I've been disabled in the past. I worked in the service industry for years and years. I have a partial college degree that I wasn't able to finish, right? Like I have a pretty normal person life trajectory, and people don't always showcase those things when they pursue public office because they're worried that it's not sufficiently impressive. And in my mind, we want a citizen legislature. We want a legislature that represents all the different lived experiences that people have. And so nothing about us without us is what I always come back to. We can't legislate for things like this without people who have had the relevant experience involved somehow. So I don't know, maybe there are others that are talking about their law degree instead of the fact that they do, Instacart and DoorDash on the side to stay alive.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep. I doubt Instacart, but
Yeah, I know. I just had to.
Not in
I had to
Colorado.
throw that
Not
out.
in-
I
not
had
in
to throw it
Colorado.
out there. Definitely not in Colorado.
but Stephanie, before we wrap this up, okay, do you have like a minute elevator pitch to the person that you might run into? I know that we've kind of already talked about it all, but how would you summarize it if you had a minute to pitch somebody?
Just on the bill.
In general, a gig worker, you're in an
Yeah.
elevator with them. You got a minute.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Working people make the world go round. We're the ones producing all the value in our economy, and most of us are also consumers of whatever it is that we're producing. And so, we deserve to be in charge of our work. We deserve to get paid what we're worth for it. We deserve to have a say in the system. So, anything that we can do to make the economy that we're working in actually work for the people who are adding all the value to it, I say we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody can debate that change is needed. It's everybody will debate about how that change comes about. That's where it comes, but everybody sees there's issues here. But, even some people see it as the business has the right to do what they want. And I can agree with that side too, but if they're going to do that, the transparency has to be there. It's a must.
Yeah.
You just can't send us out on wild goose chases and turn this into a game. It's not a game. People are making livings off this. So as much as this is a free country, I mean, you still have to show people legit offers,
That's right.
I often make the joke that never would a general contractor say to a plumber, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you 10% of your bid. And if you do a really good job, I might pay the whole thing.
Yeah.
The plumber would be like, I'm just going to go to the
Pound
next
sand,
contractor.
man. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for having me on this and for your leadership on this issue, both of you, and your kind of your respective ways. I feel like we have a little bit of everything here, right? With like just kind of the ways that we all keep an iron in whatever fire is available to us. But
in the end, we're all for the drivers.
This is how we make it better.
We're all for the gig workers.
Yep.
And every gig worker is going to have a different perspective on it, but just got to keep talking until things happen,
Yeah, absolutely.
David, you got any last words here? Or?
No, just thank you, Stephanie, and we're proud of you, proud that to have you as part of our movement, and proud to support what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Proud to work with both of you as well.
And again, congratulations on the win.
Thank
I know, as you said, you went for it once before. You learned, and then you went for it again. You won. So hard work pays off, guys.
And hey, get other gig drivers out there. Don't rule it out. Run for something. Run for something.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I think people need to hear it. So enjoy. Please leave comments, and we will take a look and get back to you guys. So with that, have a nice evening, and we will see you next week on Para Presents.
Bye.